Hello and welcome to this eclipse season reading. We are just shy of the new moon in Scorpio and Scorpio season, and we are looking at the energies between this period and the full moon total lunar eclipse on November 8th in Taurus. Now, as you've probably heard, this is a very potent, energetic um, collapse in many ways. But when I say collapse, I'm meaning along the lines of a tower, but in a productive sense of what the tower is, we have the awareness already that these structures, these relationships, these ways of communicating, interacting no longer serve us. And so we have to change our approach. And a lot of that in Scorpio is about stripping away the layers to get closer to our authentic selves. And perhaps not even just closer to, but completely our authentic selves. Thus, me doing this reading on my bed, in real lighting, you'll have noticed, and it's just full radical self-acceptance. So I hope you enjoy seeing me in this condition. It's rather ridiculous, but it's exactly what I felt I needed to do for this particular reading. Plus, I'm getting cozy. It's the fall, and it finally has gotten a tiny little bit cooler here in Los Angeles, and it's windy. Winds of change are upon us, and unfortunately, that also means wildfires in Southern California. Anyway, I'm going to start by reading about Scorpio so that we can set the tone for the themes ahead of us. And then we'll focus a little on the eclipses, and then we shall get into the reading, which is going to be very unique as well because I haven't pulled any cards. We're going to do that together. Okay, so we have a fixed water sign, Scorpio, planetary rulership Mars and Pluto. The tarot card is the Death card. And yeah, let's read. The fixed water sign of Scorpio begins its season mid-autumn as the time changes and we begin the shorter, colder, and darker days that send us inside. In the northern hemisphere, of course. The foliage and flowers of summer have begun to fade and die as the trees release their colorful leaves back to the earth. In the same way, Scorpio season takes us into our inner depths and draws us deep within to explore what we need to understand and release about the past season as we move towards the end of the year and the beginning of the next. Scorpio is a deeply emotional and intimate sign that can get to the bottom of things and understand where transformation needs to take place for higher expression. Scorpio is a seeker of truth and a revealer of secrets. Key words for Scorpio are sex, death, rebirth, and magic. As a fixed sign, Scorpio represents a very determined and at times insatiable aspect of the water element. Scorpio is deep, intriguing, passionate, and oftentimes a bit wild. Scorpio is also easily hurt and can shut down externally towards those it feels have done it wrong. It can also be deeply honest and seeks to bring out the truth of any situation. Mars and Pluto rule Scorpio. The Mars of Aries takes us towards the light of the sun with a masculine force of forward motion and confidence. The Mars of Scorpio is led by Pluto's transformative force deep into the underworld aspects of us. Aries burns brightly towards the outer expression. Scorpio flows powerfully towards the depths of the inner impulses that ultimately control those external expressions. Scorpio is found south of Ophiuchus in the night sky and once marked the point of the autumn equinox 3,000 years ago. In classical myth, Scorpio's primary role was as the slayer of Orion, reflected in the stars themselves. As Orion dies in the west, Scorpio rises in the east. Energetically, Scorpio heralds the onset of torrential rains and can signify the influx of earthing of the energies released at the autumn equinox. While these energies of death, release, and decay are often thought of as baneful, contributing to the intensity of this sign, when worked with properly, they can initiate you into the mysteries of rebirth. The tarot card of Scorpio is the Death card. This card, of course, teaches us the value of total transformation through ego death. When we can allow our old paradigms and ways of being to die within us, we can be reborn again into a newer and more conscious version of ourselves. But we can only allow this to happen if we are intimately aware of what is motivating us and identifying the aspects of us that need change. Scorpio is motivated by the desire for truth and deep connection. While Libra makes connections and establishes balance, Scorpio takes the established balance to go deep into the intimacy with self and others. Scorpio wants union through deep bonding and thus has an affinity for sexuality and in-depth exploration of what may be seen as the more hidden or taboo aspects of life. Scorpio's highest goal is to transform the lower aspects of the personality into the higher aspects of the soul to create an integrated being. In the depth of exploration, we emerge from the depths of the emotions and the psyche with the truth of being renewed and unified with the higher self. Now, of course, there's a lot of fear surrounding the themes that Scorpio touches on, and as we just read, it really does come down to our perspective. It comes down to whether or not we are forward-thinking enough, confident enough to focus on the rebirth that comes after the death, rather than being focused solely on the death energy. And I can tell you that a lot of fear surrounding mortality subconsciously came up in my life. I even manifested it from the perspective that of my pandemic series, one of the pandemic series that I got through in great part during the lockdowns was a show called This Is Us, which, if you're not familiar with it, focuses on intergenerational dynamics in a family, ranging through multiple generations, but mostly centering around a mother and a father figure in this family. And ultimately, it is the celebration of a life from birth to death. And I happened to pick the series back up a few weeks ago after not watching it for about a year and a half, because once we were past the lockdowns, I was like, screw that, I'm not watching anything, I've got other things to focus on. But I've been a little bit more insular lately, as a result of some mental health flare-ups and also some complex dynamics in my own family. And I live on the other side of the world from my family, so and I'm completely estranged from my father, and so these episodes of This Is Us were focused around the death of the matriarch. And, this was very difficult for me because my own mother was going through some very difficult issues of her own that were mirrored in my own issues and also in another family member's mental health. And it was really so bizarre that there was so much of a focus on these things. But of course, it is all Scorpio driven. It's the preparation for Scorpio because of this intense eclipse um, chapter ahead of us, which is going to be deeply transformative and deeply destructive in many ways. And there will be death and there will be um, renewal. But we have to be willing to let go. And in order to be willing to let go, we have to know what it is that we're letting go of. And in order to do that, we have to focus on a primary theme of this energy and season, which is, who are you when you take the mask off? And what are your values authentically? We have, Taurus, Scorpio's opposite, is all about values and, earthly possessions and materialism and, the essence of earth and how it enriches our lives and how we enrich it. And Scorpio is of the ether. It's of the some. I mean, I know we refer to it as the underworld because of the idea of the unknown being frightening, but I prefer not to look at it quite that way because if you're looking at it from the point of view of it being the mysteries and sex and sexuality and the psyche, these are amazing, expansive sources of energy if we could tap into them in a healthy way. Again, for me personally, I'm going through a lot of, I'm in a total need for radical self-acceptance because um, I have struggled with extreme self-esteem issues, and they have come crashing on top of me in recent times, and it's been really hard for me not to feel completely despondent and hateful towards myself, and because of the chaos and turmoil around me and other people and in the world at large, it's really triggering of those things, and I'm sure you probably have your own variation on that in your life. So, um, radical self-acceptance is a very difficult one because of the amount of shame that is embedded within me. Um, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit right now for the purpose solely of a um, an exercise in transparency. I have a ton of toxic shame around masculinity and heteronormativity because I grew up feeling ashamed of being gay, and I grew up feeling very ashamed of any kind of effeminate, that's the right word, in within me. Um, I was shamed very actively as a child around that. I was called um, a poofter, which is a British term for fag, basically, by my own father from when I was a very little child. I was chastised and bullied by my father, and subsequently, by proxy, the rest of my family probably felt the need to curb these aspects within me as well. Obviously, it was a different time. I started primary school um, at age 5 in 1980. So it was a very, very different time in terms of sexual identity and gender identity, and there was no acceptance around that whatsoever, and it was deeply shameful. And of course, that's a big part of it. It's like how our parents um, approach us is, that we're not, it's not just about um, the values surrounding those things that induce shame in me, but it's the fact that they were ashamed of me because of the effect that that would have on their um, sense of being. And so the radical lack of authenticity externally that became my reality over the years, and I'm just giving that as the core, you know, nascent point of that toxic shame, uh, among other things, because of course subsequent to that there were all kinds of things that continued to make me feel ashamed of myself, and I did a lot of things in my life that perpetuated that shame cycle, and that lasted a very, very long time in my life. So this is the kind of example of what Scorpio and a eclipse in Scorpio energy um, does. And also, of course, because that amplifies the scorpionic energy, this will be the whole pivot throughout the month of November in Scorpio season. And, that full moon eclipse in Taurus, for me, again, is extremely triggering because my rising sign is Taurus, and I'm at 16 degrees Taurus, which is exactly where this eclipse will take place. So, transformation around all of this shame that prevents me from being my authentic self, that prevented me for weeks from being able to record a video or to record a video without being in darkness, because I literally was in complete rejection of myself and the value of who I am. And it's time for me, so I hope by proxy it's an inspiration to you to let go of all of these attempts to fool everyone into believing that we are something that we are not. Sexuality is a huge part of that, and I mean literally sex as in the attraction process, because as a gay man, any feminine trait within me is repugnant in the sexual game around toxic masculinity within gay people. And of course, I understand that we have moved into a time where we are all gleed out and everybody is supposed to believe that people live in a rainbow world of multiple gender identities, and that everyone's free to be whatever they want to be. Well, I'm afraid that that's not the case. It's not the truth. And if you look at pornography and the pornographication of imagery and identity, the fantasy around sex is always around the extreme of, for example, for a man looking at a woman, the extreme femininity of a woman, in the same way as a woman generally looks at extreme masculinity in a man as being sexually desirable. And that goes for gay relationships with the way that we look at it. So you can imagine if every single guy is looking for somebody who is like showing all the external signs of toxic masculinity, that makes for a seriously unhealthy dynamic, which is celebrated and um, essentially um, I can't think of the word. It just becomes the established norm in any case. So, anyway, I'm moving on from that because this isn't a public service announcement about that, but it is about figuring out where you have shame or where you have hidden aspects of yourself, or very often that can come down to aspects of repressed sexuality because we're not able to, well, many of us are not able to really express what we truly feel or desire because, when you have the safety of intimacy, the security of intimacy, should I say, um, we've all had that in our lives at some point, or hopefully we have, where we felt so safe that we could be ourselves and we could behave however we really wanted to and be loved and accepted, and we could explore our fantasies around um, perhaps even violence, um, or um, role playing, or whatever it may be. These are all parts of the human psyche. And when we are no longer attached to that intimacy through another person, and when we have an underdeveloped intimacy with ourselves, that can become very overshadowing when it comes to authenticity. I think you'll find that your truth in that. Just as a reminder, a solar eclipse is really about renewal. So it intensifies that. It will intensify the energy of the new moon in the idea of setting new intentions. The new moon and this first eclipse are actually quite positive. And when I say positive, I mean that the energy will not feel turbulent or frightening or intense. However, the full moon lunar eclipse will, given that it's a full moon, it's about endings, and it's about letting go of situations and relationships and processes and emotional patterns that don't work for us any longer. And we have to figure that out. So let's see if we can figure it out through some cards. I'm going to start by pulling a Spirit Animal Oracle card because it's been a while since we did that. And while we wait for a card to manifest itself, well, we don't have to wait any longer because it came out. Couldn't be more on the nose, right? Bat Spirit, a rebirth is assured. Let me read that message for us. Number 5. After something has run its course and died or been released, finished, surrendered, completed, or ended, there is a promise of a new beginning. Rebirth is assured just as night gives way to dawn and the bat emerges from the darkness of a womb-like cave. Bat Spirit has come to remind you that this rebirth is a miraculous one, for the very best elements of what you had to give up in the death of the old are still present in this new, amazing life forming now. This is the miracle and magic of rebirth in every aspect of your life, including the rebirth of faith in your ability to establish new and healthy relationships. that is extremely timely and probably where we need to focus our energy. Bat Spirit reminds you that at present you are in unknown territory and may feel as though you are lost. However, you are called to trust that your intuition will be a reliable guide as you give birth to something new and unfamiliar. But Spirit has listened in the darkness of night and has heard all your hopes and dreams, your fears and worries, and assures you that this new version of your dream, this move from darkness into light, from lost to found and death to rebirth, comes to fruition with love at its core. Bat Spirit asks that you trust what seems to have died is actually shape-shifting into something even more meaningful and wondrous than before. If you feel you're in the dark, know that come morning all will be revealed and things will be in a new form that is right for you. And our protection message is the following. What are you refusing to let die? Bath Spirit is gently nudging you to let go of your need to cling to the familiar story that has already run its course. A new story is poised to be born, which is why we need to get into that authentic self, stripping ourselves away of the mask that we put on for society. Because the truth of the matter is, unless we are in our authentic self, unless we are a full representation of authenticity, unless we are willing to face ourselves, no lies, accept what our weaknesses are, and understand that they're also our superpower in many ways. Unless we face that truth, the harshest of truths within us, and turn that into radical self-acceptance, we will never, ever, ever be fulfilled. We will never be on the right path to fulfillment, because it will all be a lie. And we don't realize just how diabolically exaggerated that becomes over the course of time when we keep pretending to be something that we're not, when we keep pursuing things that are not really what we want. So we have to think about that. Some dreams were only meant to last for a moment in time. Sometimes they were only there to slow you down as you recalibrated in preparation for the new life that will give you what you really want. Perhaps you need to grieve as you say goodbye to something. At least you're saying goodbye to it in its familiar form. Perhaps you must let go of a part of you that must die so you can be reborn. This temporary time in the dark doesn't have to be scary or sad, though. Bat Spirit gives you her powers of perception and awareness as you learn to listen deeply and navigate these unknown caves of temporary emptiness. You will emerge with a new perspective, and Bat Spirit will witness you giving birth to the life that matches the intentions and desires of your heart and soul. And I have to think a lot about that because the triggers for me are in relationships. I think Seven Pals stuff, and it's hard for me to be truthful with myself about that because I've convinced myself that I am so repugnant and so unlovable that I cannot even imagine somebody else loving me. Of course, I've had relationships in my life. I had a very active pursuit of sexuality in my life for many years. And then when I sort of went through my spiritual awakening, I did a lot of bypassing of that. And, you know, next thing you know, time goes by and you just don't feel comfortable with that part of yourself at all. And then you build up all kinds of reasons why that can't be a part of your radical acceptance and truth. And so you become very disconnected from fundamental parts of who you are as a human being. So I know that for me, when I asked myself what it is that I want to manifest in my life, after many years of being in denial of this, and or perhaps not just in denial, perhaps for a period of time it just wasn't right for me, but to come around to that realization that, I'm getting older and like I have fears of not having a connection in my life. I've spent certainly this year with all the changes that have taken place in my life and the fact that I also made a conscious decision to radically eliminate a few aspects of people in my life that were just really not um, acceptable um, for me. I could not tolerate the behavior of these people. Um, I found myself quite alone, and I continue to feel quite alone. New aspects are emerging in my life, but a lot of the older aspects are really um, they've proven themselves to really not be worthy of my attention. And I can find myself on days like today, and I'm giving the example at the risk of upsetting people that might watch this, but I had plans to have a phone call with my sister this morning that never happened because I called her and she didn't answer, and then I never heard from the rest of the day. I was meant to have dinner with a friend of mine this evening whose mother is in town, and when I reached out to her, it took her about 3 hours to get back to me, but she basically told me that she wasn't in the mood to be going out and that she needed time to herself, and I was just like, okay, bitch. And so you're terrifying people. Um, and then I was supposed to also have a phone call with an old friend of mine in France, which was meant to take place a week ago and didn't take place then because she was too tired. And I called today as planned, and this person literally told me that they didn't have time to talk to me because they had to do something else. And of course, I don't have to be triggered by all of these things. I'm sure that there are circumstances that justify all of this in other people's minds. But think about what that feels like for one person in one day to go through that. I can only take that as a sign from the universe that I was meant to spend the time with myself, and I appreciated that because in the end it was useful in that way. But at the same time, it's very painful to be on the receiving end of that because there was a time in my life where I thrived on being the center of attention, and I wouldn't have tolerated those types of things from people. I would have called them out and caused conflict. And, now I don't need to do that because I know it's not really about me, it's about them, but it still feels very lonely to be in that place, to have that much lack of connection, because one can only safely say that whether or not it's intended as a personal attack, which it probably is not, it still is a representation of how you are not a priority to any of those people in that moment for them to have done that. So again, I'm not crying over it, but I'm just saying that these have been general themes in my life for some time, and it's been kind of alarming to discover that I'm pretty alone, and I don't want to be alone. I want nurturing relationships with people where I am learning, where they set the example for me to learn from. So, need to find that. And I think where I was going with all that was that I basically got to the point in my life where I realized that I wanted um, to have a family, because I have had such an awful experience of family in my life. And, I'm 47 years old, and it's a little ridiculous at 47 to decide that I want a family, particularly as a gay man. But I guess anything's possible, right? It's also possible that I could completely change my mind. But I wanted to take that card, and then suddenly I realized, well, I'm not sure. Maybe it needs to, if it wants to come out, it'll come out. But it seemed like it wanted to come out, and then, then I felt as though I was leading. So I don't want to do that. These cards are really hard to shuffle because they're kind of giants. So. Anyway, I know I'm talking a lot about my personal life, and hopefully find something interesting in that. Let's see what this card is. Yeshe Tsogyal 333. Number 33. These are still completely unknown to me, so I'm discovering them with you. So let's see what the message is. You shall overcome all obstacles. Success is imminent. To stay connected to your path no matter what, and continue. Sorry, that was meant to read. Success is imminent. So stay connected to your path no matter what, and continue to apply yourself. Allow your spiritual path to support you in all areas of your life. Live by your spiritual beliefs. Seek out the support of your spiritual brothers and sisters for help when needed, but also trust that you are intimately and directly connected to the powerful divine light within. There can be a dramatic healing breakthrough when you rely upon your spiritual connection. Spiritual teachings from Bhutan hold that the great Indian master Padmasambhava was called to Bhutan from Tibet to subdue demons that were causing difficulties for the people of the Paro Valley. He flew from Tibet to Bhutan on the back of a supernatural tigress, landing as a cave. Honestly, I swear to God, it's the typeface. It is so bad in this. I'm not incapable of reading. He flew from Tibet to Bhutan on the back of a supernatural tigress, landing at a cave high up in the cliffs of Bhutan. He spent the next 3 years, 3 months, 3 weeks, and 3 days meditating and performing rituals to subdue the demons of the land, liberating Bhutan from the terror into peace. The supernatural tigress is believed to have been Yeshe Tsogyal, a yogini guardian for humanity and an emanation of the compassionate goddess of peace, prosperity, and long life known as White Tara. Yeshe Tsogyal's power is that of the tiger Siddha, or medicine of spirit tiger. Her presence in a reading indicates that a boldness of spirit and willingness to engage your challenges will create the path to inevitable success. She represents our ability to generate the spiritual power necessary to accomplish what needs to manifest for the greatest good. This oracle encourages you to call upon your higher spiritual guides for assistance. This empowers them to bring their light to the world through you, and for you to grow in your own spiritual advancement too. Remember, enlightenment is a team effort with extraordinary individual players working together as one. You belong on such a team. Tiger skin is depicted in sacred iconography to represent fearless enlightenment that cuts through all obstacles. Deities such as Tara in her fierce emanation of Ekajati and her ferocious expression as the wrathful protective feminine deity Palden Lamo and wild Lord Shiva are often pictured wearing or seated upon tiger skins. This represents the indomitable will that conquers negativities because it refuses to be overcome. Numerous divine beings are depicted moving through the world with the tiger as their sacred mount, enabling them to accomplish their spiritual purpose. Tiger is a symbol for navigating treacherous territories and the triumph of light over darkness. Tiger spirit medicine controls the poisons of anger and hatred, transforming them into passion, clarity, and unwavering commitment to one's higher purpose. The oracle of Yeshid-Sogal 333 augurs empowerment and healing by assuming a confident attitude and taking steps forward. It indicates that a negative time is drawing to a close and encourages commitment to the task of overcoming negativities through spiritual practices suited to you. It doesn't matter if you feel like a beginner or are uncertain of how to meditate, for example. Yeshid-Sogal became enlightened because she made progress one step at a time, attracting the right teachers and guides to assist her. You have the precious gift of such a path. It is good karma to have such a path, and it creates further good karma when you pursue it. The repeated three symbolizes that all manners of assistance and support will be granted to ensure your attainment. This will include the gifts of appropriate teachings and teachers, friends, healers, synchronicity, circumstance, and opportunity. Trust the universe and go for what you want with boldness and courage. Finally, this oracle indicates triumph over even the most severely negative energies, with the help of supernatural intervention if needs be. To activate that blessing, be determined to prevail. Fully empower the beneficial workings of the light in your life and in one world. Truly, you are a light worker. Embrace it and live it. And here's the healing process that is recommended for us. So I invite you to set your attentions now and get ready to do this. Be seated somewhere comfortable. If you are a visual person, follow the visualization below, allowing the symbols to enter your soul without having to analyze or interpret them. If you are more of a feeling person, read the description below aloud, noticing any emotions or sensations that arise as you do so, and allowing them to soak into your soul without needing to analyze or interpret them. To prepare yourself, connect consciously with your breath as it flows in and out. Allow the breath to become deeper and more complete, calming and centering you in the present moment. You may like to place a hand over your heart to connect you with your soul essence. Relax. Become receptive at your soul level, open and willing to take in symbolic nourishment to empower, protect, and heal you. When you are ready, read and visualize or feel the following description. You see a brilliant white sun. It shines radiant white light through continually shifting mandalas of sacred geometric patterns. Waves of light move through you, slow, deep, and healing. Out of the most luminous center of this sun, a solar tiger of white light stalks forth. You see the numbers 333 emblazoned above her. Light continues to amplify itself, reaching far and wide into every dimension. There is no barrier that can withstand it. The waves of light continue to move through you, slow, powerful, and deep. Rest for as long as you feel is best, allowing the process to soak into the depths of your soul. Ground and hydrate yourself. You have completed your healing process. Sorry, I suddenly got weirded out by the way that my cards were sitting around. Now, this deck has been pre-shuffled, so we'll take the cards as they fly out. We have two knights, the Knight of Wands and the Knight of Pentacles. I'll take this. Okay, those are reversed. I don't know if we'll do a 6 or a 9 card spread. Let's see how easily the rest of the cards come out, but I'm liking this message so far. Got a lot of reversals in this deck because my cards flew all over the place inside the box where I keep them, and then I just put them together willy-nilly, so I'm just going to take it as being the will of the universe to have any cards that come out in reverse. So we're starting the reading looking at it from the perspective of the Knight of Wands representing ourselves in our past energy, and I feel like it's actually more of a state of an ideal that we wish that we were still in. The Knight of Wands is a very self-confident, fast-moving card, and sorry, I'm going to take another deck and just clarify these cards as they come out. And so what we're looking at is the authenticity factor. That is the Knight of Wands. That's who we truly are. This kind of beaming, shining beacon of self-confidence. It's that childlike spirit before we were conditioned, where we found ourselves in the position where we just expressed what came from our heart, before we were told that being a certain way wasn't right for us, that but we might, very often it's out of protection even, that our parents or teachers restrict our personalities because they don't want us to be ostracized, they don't want us to be bullied, they don't want us to be singled out for being different, and yet, of course, it's the most ridiculous fraud of a lifetime, because it's exactly that you need, right? It's really fucked up how these things happen, right? It's just, and then it's just an unraveling process from all that conditioning, for however long is required. In my case, it was required until I'm almost half a century old, so go figure. Yeah, I figured we'd have the Hangman in there somewhere. Um, so I do want to get into these, but it's just like very jumpy, these cards. Um, one last one for the outcome clarifier. Oh, we got two cards here. Okay, interesting. Um, yeah, there's a lot of contemplation here on display. So the Knight of Wands as our initiator and the root of this energetic shift is clarified by the High Priestess in reverse. And sorry, there's glare on that. So the High Priestess in reverse is really a move away from. I'm just going to go in. I'm so sorry, but I need to rearrange my clothing. Everything feels very bizarre suddenly. Um, it's a move away. I'm going into total intuition with these cards. That's how it's going to work. I'm just going with it. So bear with me. A move away from our spirituality, a move away from our inner voice is what shut down this self-confidence. It's integral to who we are, that our self-confidence is a result of being connected to spirit, to having our spiritual rituals, our deep faith. And there's a loss of faith at some point, radical, unfortunate loss of faith that resulted in moving into a purely materialistic perspective with this Knight of Pentacles here. Of course, the Knight of Pentacles is slow and steady, and slow and steady wins the race, but it also disconnects from, when we become solely focused on the material realm, a part of us dies, a part of us, or at least lays dormant, and it's very unhealthy for us. We lose perspective on what we are here for. Clarifiers on that are the Three of Wands and the Eight of Wands. So here we have the idea that um, communication and expectation became our grounding tools in life. Um, Communication stopped being something that opened us up and instead became very rigid, and the rigidity in turn built us into this perpetual materialistic sense of what we call progress, linear time, linear perspective on life, which is why capitalism doesn't work in the long run. Just from the perspective that, this idea of having to perpetually grow and increase profit rather than just sustainability, and the the radical truth of being in a framework of good enough. What I have is good enough. What I am is good enough. What I share of myself is good enough. What I represent is good enough. This has been corrupted, and this is what's coming to the forefront of, this is what needs to clear now, with these eclipses. And that's where it's going to be painful for many of us, because we hide a lot behind those material comforts, and the idea that that is where our growth lies. It's a delusion. Um, as a result of this, we end up with the Four of Cups and the Ace of Cups, which both came out reversed. I'm not really sure. Um, I will take this as being that, um, with the Ace of Cups reversed, we're looking at not being despondent, not being, it's okay. So the reason these come out together is because the duality is being stuck. I'm taking the clarifier into consideration with this, the Hanged Man. The Hanged Man implies that where we are stuck, what we have had to voluntarily put ourselves into suspension of existence in order to resolve. This is what is happening, this process with these eclipses, is we have to take the time, be the Hanged Man, to suspend ourselves from forward movement or even from past contemplation in order to understand that we cannot receive we cannot receive when we are in fear, in pain, in poverty consciousness, in jadedness, in it's I'm having the vision from the traditional Rider-Waite. It's like kind of like rather than usually we consider that the person in the page in the Four of Cups is so focused on what they don't want that they don't see the divine gift being given to them. But here, I'm getting the sense that it's more that we've been protecting ourselves. We've been pretending that we don't want the things that we want in order to protect ourselves from failing to get them. Which makes sense, but it's pretty messed up, right? Um, and the only way out of that is through this temperance energy. And the temperance energy here is the implication that we have to, as a result of this Hanged Man time out, we have to reconsider how to bring this High Priestess from being reversed back to being upright into our lives. I think this happens a lot, it's like we get so caught up in the mental swords, and as much as truth is truth itself is integral to faith and to well, as a pursuit, but it's truth is not truth is always being framed as an absolute, whereas faith is impossible to define as an absolute. So they they don't gel. It's so hard to express because it's obviously they don't oppose each other, but they're from different metaphysical um, realms, and so the temperance process is really about figuring out how to integrate faith with this authenticity and this truth. And that requires self-love. That all comes from within. We have the clarification of this with the Ten of Wands. Now, the Ten of Wands is really when we reached the end of a cycle of inspiration, the end of a particular drive towards a goal. And, in the traditional tarot, it's depicted as, you know, being close to crossing the finishing line, but being really, you know, worn out by the process. Um, of course, looking at these cards here, and given the energy of the season that we're moving into and the intensity of these eclipses, there is probably a propensity towards being mentally and physically drained. So prepare yourselves for that. But again, the Temperance card is there as a representation of faith being the great equalizer in that balance. You have to in taking off the masks and the layers of falsehoods, you have to, oh, it's like an infusion, you have to infuse every layer with, it's almost like it dissolves the falsehood and the artifice and the darkness of the lies that we've told ourselves in um, our programming, all to protect ourselves, of course. Um, but it's a false pursuit. Next, as we move through that temperance process, we come to the Two of Wands. We find ourselves finally in a position where we are um, empowered again to be able to see the choices that we have. It's clarified by the Magician. So inevitably, this is a focus on the understanding of the strength within to manifest the reality that we want. In other words, all those things that we've told ourselves that we cannot have, or the things that we've avoided having because we were afraid that we might not get them if we tried, we strip ourselves of all that artifice and go through the dark night of the soul that it entails in order to get through to this authenticity and understanding that we are the creators of our experience and our reality, and therefore we are the ones empowered with choice. So everywhere that we feel that we don't have a choice, a new perspective shifts. Probably, I would imagine, as vastly as to discover that, some of the things that we thought we wanted, we actually really don't want at all. And all of that can be really confusing, right? So, and inevitably leads to an ending, and we have that. Our outcome card is the world, and um, the world is an ending of something pretty radically big, um, clarified by the Eight of Pentacles. So this is a work pursuit, some kind of a conviction that we had of like what we are, what our craft is, what our talent is, what our drive is, what we are meant to do. And we've lied to ourselves, or we've just convinced ourselves, it's very easy to do in this materialistic, ridiculous world that we live in. We have to choose a career path and we have to make a living. And so we confine ourselves to this like identity of what we do. I'm like a house manager slash estate manager slash personal assistant, and that's what I am. And I think that, I'm like, that's my destiny, is to be like, fucking Downton Abbey for the 21st century. And it's like, am I good at it? Maybe, but I'm hiding behind it. And on many levels, I probably resent it. And it's a mask. So I'm speaking for myself. I'm not going to project that onto you, but you would have to figure that out in your realm. But I don't know what that means for me. I'm not ready to even face any of that or think about it. But I do know that I went to see a play last night, or the first part of a play, because it's actually a two-part play, each part 3 hours, and I have to see second part next weekend. And it was a beautiful play called The Inheritance. And I was watching the actors. I was in the second row, and I was just watching them, and I was like, God, That's what I wanted to do. That's always what I wanted to do. When I was a child, I was an actor. That's what I wanted to do. I just had really shitty family dynamics and school dynamics that, well, not so much school dynamics, because actually school allowed me to do drama, but it just wasn't encouraged. In fact, it was pretty much shut down. And by the time we moved to France, when I was 12 years old, I went to French schools where it was purely academic and obviously in a completely different language. I didn't have any of the cultural references even to think about French theater or anything. So um, I got stunted. And so I was so inspired watching, excuse me, these actors. And then for years I had such toxic shame and so much inhibition. I put forth that I had this extremely extroverted personality, but all of the trauma really, like, I was deeply inhibited. And in my early adulthood in New York, I tried to convince myself, excuse me, that I was pursuing a career in acting. But when I was taking acting lessons, I mean, I was crippled with fear, and I did overcome that to a degree. But I just never felt that I would be good enough, and I hated the idea of auditions. I hated the scrutiny and the rejection and whatever else, so I just didn't pursue it. Same thing with my music as a performer. Um, and of course, now I suppose I am closer to having that kind of, I don't know if it's so much the self-confidence or just the I don't give a shit kind of mentality. I don't care as much what other people think. At the same time, I do allow myself to be reduced down to my age, and that it would be ridiculous for me to try to do these things at this point in my life. But at the same time, as I said, you look at where you came from, what you didn't pursue, what didn't work out for you, but what made you happy, and when you're sitting watching actors in a play and you're just like, oh wow, this is like something that I really thrived on or would have loved to have thrived on, you understand. And it probably won't manifest as an actor at this point in my life because I'm not really sure that's something I have the patience to pursue, but at the same time, it's sort of an indication of something, perhaps, that is, certainly. I mean, I work in an environment now where I cannot be my authentic self. It's just not welcome. And to be perfectly honest with you, nobody really cares either. They're not interested in that. So, um, that poses a pretty big dilemma for me because there's a lot of repression there. So, anyway, I digress. But Eight of Pentacles, the other clarifier was the Seven of Cups. And of course, when you have the Death card on the Seven of Cups and the Eight of Pentacles, basically you're looking at a lot of things that we've defined ourselves by in terms of the array of choice that we would like to think represents life, like um, like having seven choices does not make you feel like you have more choice than if you had two choices. You know what I mean? I don't know how to explain that better, but that's kind of what it boils down to. And so, because we had that Two of Wands and we have this um, ending of the Seven of Cups, it's like a streamlining of our sense of direction, purpose, identity, um, that is coming as a result of this purge. So it'll be interesting to see how all that manifests. I have no idea. Let's pull one Osho card as an outcome. And I do think that this makes perfect sense because I do feel that this death cycle Scorpio thing is about maturing. It's about leveling up. And what is leveling up? As we get older, we have a lot of fear of like our bodies aging, of us being closer to death, you know. Um, Not because we're afraid of dying necessarily, although a lot of people are afraid of dying, but it's more the sadness, it's facing the grief of like what we will no longer have access to, because there is great beauty to the life experience. I was having this thought. I had a wailing crying fit last night, and I realized, when I'm really sad, there's a release in crying, that it's a very confusing, overwhelming moment, because you're crying because there are certain states of innocence or certain experiences that you will never have again. I was thinking about just the idea of not having my mother. We all have to face this in our lives, and it's, um, I was flooded with, it was because of watching This Is Us, and it was the last two episodes, and Mother died. And sorry if that's a spoiler for you, but it's pretty much obvious that that's what the series leads to. Um, but it was extremely triggering of all these emotions, and that sort of visualization of your life, of like all those, for all the difficulties, for all the troubles, for all the resentment, for all the disappointments, that there is, a fundamental beauty of love, of the experience of attachment and nurture, and, you know, whether things were right or wrong, it doesn't really matter. Like, it's just like that's so integral to life. And then, as we get older, and those things become more and more of a reality. It's like you just, when you're younger, you can kind of get away with like looking at it as like, well, I'm a baby, I don't have to think about these things, or I'm not prepared for this, I don't want to. And then you get older and you're like, oh, well, I have to accept this reality. And I have to accept that it's a tragedy for everyone, but because it's a tragedy for everyone, it's not unique, and it's not something that we can really externally define ourselves by. It's an inner process. It's something that we have to accept and face internally, and that terrifies me because it's just an implication of more loneliness. And then at the same time, I realize that all of the spirituality, remember the high priestess from reverse to upright, is about never feeling alone, because we are always with spirit, right? Which is the irony of death in general, is the idea of a physical death, is that you move into that infinite source of oneness. Um, so our Osho card is the maturity card. And that's how it feels this Scorpio season. We are maturing, and that means moving past a point of, um, the things we once knew and we once were. So there's sorrow in that, there's grief, and that may be what we go through with this, eclipse cycle. So, I'm going to take this as a sign, because the sun also, from the tarot deck, was in this book. It just came out. I'm taking that as our outcome. So I guess I should hold up that card for you. Let me put it there. Take a good look, because I can't really hold it and read. This figure stands alone, silent and yet alert. The inner being is filled with flowers that carry the quality of springtime and regenerate wherever he goes. This inner flowering and the wholeness that he feels affords the possibility of unlimited movement. He can move in any direction, within and without. It makes no difference, as his joy and maturity cannot be diminished by externals. He has come to a time of centeredness and expansiveness. The white glow around the figure is his protection and his light. All of life's experiences have brought him to this time of perfection. When you draw this card, know well this moment carries a gift for hard work well done. Your base is solid now, and success and good fortune are yours, for they are the outcome of what has already been experienced within. The distinction between the grasses and the blossoms is the same as between you not knowing that you are a Buddha and the moment you know that you are a Buddha. In fact, there is no way to be otherwise. Buddha is completely blossomed, fully opened. His lotuses, his petals have come to completion. Certainly to be full of spring yourself is far more beautiful than the autumn dews falling on the lotus leaves. That is one of the most beautiful things to watch, when autumn dews fall on the lotus leaves and shine in the morning sun like real pearls. But of course it is a momentary experience. As the sun rises, the autumn dews start evaporating. This temporary beauty cannot be compared, certainly, with an eternal spring in your being. You look back as far as you can, and it has always been there. You look forward as much as you can, and you will be surprised. It is your very being. Wherever you are, it will be there, and the flowers will continue to shower on you. This is spiritual spring. And I think that that's the essence of it, which is why the Sun card is so perfect. I wish I had the Rider-Waite deck with me, because the Rider-Waite Sun is the child on the back of a unicorn. I think it's a unicorn. Um, but it's the inner child, it's the glow of youth, it's the return to innocence, the sun. It's where life comes from, it's the source of all life, right? So Osho presented it with a more philosophical approach, but um, the eternal spring within, that's what we need to focus on. That's where we're going to get to on the other side of this eclipse energy. So on that note, I hope this is helpful for you. I feel like it was a pretty synergistic reading. Um, I'm glad that we did this together. I'm sorry it ran pretty long, but hopefully you enjoyed it. I send you lots of love and light and good luck. Namaste. Amen. Love you.